Okay, thanks so much for coming. Welcome. We'll have everyone sit down, take a seat. So we're really thrilled to welcome you to Lookout's second political forum this season. We'll have one more on Thursday. That'll be the Santa Cruz City Council. We got good weather tonight, which is a big relief. I don't know how many of you had flooding and power outages and downed trees. I certainly did some of that. How many people did have some of those things, right? We're all going through it, yeah. So it's rough out there. It seems to have stopped miraculously for this forum. It did stop miraculously right before the last forum too, so feeling good about that. I'm Jody K. Beal. I'm the Community Voices editor at Lookout. I curate the opinion section, so anyone with opinions can, thank you. I'm also a professor at UCSC. I teach journalism, so I'm trying to educate the next generation of journalists. So yes, it's a very tough task, really important. We're really grateful to all of you for coming out here to showing what it means that journalism does matter, right? That what we do matters, to take part in democracy, to showcase our candidates, and really the ultimate, what I teach students at UCSC is the ultimate act of a citizen, right? We get informed, we learn, we try to figure out what's going on, we read news, but then that's only to help us take action, which is to vote, right? To help decide how we think about our communities. So I'm really grateful tonight for all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Give yourselves a big hand, really, for stepping out in the still somewhat soggy weather to support Lookout, but to support also the community and to get a sense of who you want to vote for in this election. There's so much sadness in the journalism realm right now, right? We're in this weird time where we're shifting from an old model that hasn't been working to a new model that we're looking to hope make work. And a lot of people are experimenting and trying. And I feel really lucky to be part of Lookout because Lookout is working on that, is trying to figure out what is a new model for journalism that might work. So many old established news organizations have been bought out by hedge funds, have been cut up and broken apart. LA Times had more layoffs recently. Our own Santa Cruz Sentinel is owned by a hedge fund group, Alden. Some of you may be following the Baltimore Sun. If you listened to me last forum, I talked about this too, the Baltimore Sun. This very old legacy, 186-year-old paper recently bought by David Smith, who's a top management at Sinclair Broadcast Group. Yes, I don't know if all of you know about Sinclair, right? They own one of the largest TV affiliates in the country. In 2016, David Smith reportedly told Donald Trump, "We are here to deliver your message." Right? All those TV stations across the whole United States. So I feel really lucky to be part of Lookout because we are not here to deliver anyone's message. We really are working hard to deliver news to the community, to go out and report and to bring you important topics that matter to our community and that will make a difference. So I'm proud to be part of it because Lookout is trying to create a new model. It's part of a consortium of small news organizations across the country, local startups, digital, that are trying to make a difference and change how news is reported, online, and to create a new model for what has been a broken model in the past. Lookout is growing. We have a good, robust staff. We're trying to hire an investigative journalist, which would be so great and important for this community. Yes. They're also looking to open a second Lookout, right? So this wouldn't be just a model that works here, but really to figure out how this digital model can work across the nation in other places. So that's an exciting thing to be part of. Again, where most news organizations are shrinking, to be thinking about, wow, this is something new that's breaking new horizons. Of course, all the studies show without news, without education, without knowing what's going on, the public is less educated, they vote less, right? Democracy suffers. The very first thing that people do who are dictators or people who want to seize power is limit the press. And so, again, it's such an important thing to be a part of, and thank you so much tonight for coming out to support this. Tonight, yeah, thank you, good, yes. We're really blessed tonight. We're going to have two discussion forums. The first one, we have the District 1 supervisor race. We have our candidates up here already. And then we'll be talking about Measure M at 7 o'clock. So Santa Cruz City Measure M. We have a lot of Lookout staff who've made this great event possible. Lookout staff kind of circulating over here. Could you wave, everyone? Let everyone know that you're here. They're the ones bringing like all the breaking news on the storms, right? All these people staying up really late to get you that information. Our founder, Ken Doctor, is watching from home, so he is also offering free drinks to anyone, any candidates. So staff and candidates get a free drink on Lookout. So yeah, I'd suggest after, but if you want yours, we can have it delivered to you right now, Lani. We can have it brought you up there. I'd also like to thank Jamie Garfield, where is Jamie, and Brittany Ramirez, who have been exceptional. Jamie is the Director of Student and Community Engagement, and Brittany is the Marketing and Sales Coordinator, who've ordered the food and done all the coordinating to bring us this event. So thank you so much to them. We're making Lookout free for elections, so everyone can read it. That's a part of our public service. It's also free for all college students, both UCSC and Cabrillo. Again, part of the mission to really get next generation reading. And we're working on getting it free for teachers as well. And Jamie is coordinating, helping to bring Lookout into the classrooms. So that's another initiative that, again, if we start students early with a habit of reading, of understanding their community and being engaged, we think that we can make some inroads in this community to get the young generation reading again. That all costs money, however, so we are always looking for new membership. Please help us in our mission. We do pay our staff. We are trying to create a sustainable model, so the only way we can do that is if people join. So if you're a member, thank you so much. If you're not, you might think about it, and you might try to recruit some more people to become members, because that's the only way we're going to be successful. Right? We can do our part, but we need our community to do its part as well. We're grateful to Hotel Paradox, our event partner, for offering us this amazing venue. Yes. And I also really want to take a minute just to say thank you to our candidates who are here. Yes, we should really give them a big hand. Not just for participating. That's hard, too. That's hard to be up here, especially waiting for us to start. But also, just running for office these days is really, more and more, it's taxing, it's taking a personal toll. Across the country, we're seeing fewer people wanting to run for office, which is terribly sad because they're finding it's just the personal toll is too much on their families, on their lives. And these people said yes. They stood up to you and they said they're willing to do this. So we should really be grateful to have that. All right, so without further ado, we're going to start our District 1 discussion. District 1, for those of you who don't know, it includes Live Oak, Pleasure Point, Soquel Hills, part of Capitola, the Summit area east of Highway 17, right? Did I miss anyone? I think we're pretty good there. Okay. In the past two elections, so this election and the last one, we will have seen our veteran leadership in Santa Cruz County on the Board of Supervisors exit. So that's leaving a lot of questions of who's emerging as our newest leaders. We have two candidates tonight, sorry I didn't even introduce you, Manu Koenig and Lani Faulkner. So, if Manu remains in office, he's going to be the most senior supervisor. He was voted in 4 years ago, as many of you know. If Lani wins, the most senior board member will then be Justin Cummings and Felipe Hernandez, who were just elected this past November. It's a young board plagued with big issues. That includes affordable housing, homelessness, transportation, how to respond to climate change, mental health, addiction issues, fentanyl, the jail, pesticides. We have many, many issues to think about, not to mention roads, which is everyone's favorite topic. Right. We want to help you understand what kind of leader these people would become. to help you think about which candidate you might like to elect. So we are going to ask some questions tonight. I'm going to be asking questions. We also have note cards on your table. We'd love for you to fill them out and ask your own question. We'll be collecting them. If you want to write something, just hold it up, and we will come around and collect it from you. People will be collecting it here. We also will be giving everyone, 2 minutes to answer each question. So, I'm not sure if I told you guys that, but we're going to conduct this a little bit more like a conversation than a question-answer session. I'm going to let them talk to each other, rebut each other, have a discussion. We're going to be really careful and trying to keep you guys honest with time, just so that no one overshadows someone else or takes a lot more time. But mostly I want you to interact and to have people to be able to answer each other's questions. You know, if you have something you'd like to say to each other, you're certainly more than welcome to say it. I do ask that you refrain from robust applause and no booing, obviously, right? We want to keep this civil. We'll be collecting cards at the end. And then we'll also, the very last thing we'll do is we'll have a quick lightning round of questions. Just one-word answers, just kind of fun at the very end. Okay. Again, so these two people, we're going to start in just a minute. Just to remind you, the Board of Supervisors oversees a $1.5 billion budget. It sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, that's for the whole county, for all the services that you receive. One of these people will be one of the 5 people who makes decisions about that budget. It includes mental health, needy families, food stamps, all sorts of services that our community relies on. 2 years ago, when we had our last race, the state had we had a huge budget. Now we have a close to $40 billion deficit. So these are going to be issues that are serious in our community and that our supervisors are going to have to think about how to do more with less. So those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about there. Something is going to have to give, and the questions are kind of when and where is that going to happen. So I think I think that now we're going to start our. I can't think of anything else that I've missed to say, but we're going to begin. And I asked each candidate to take 60 seconds just to introduce themselves to you, and that'll be our 60 seconds. And then after that, we'll be giving everyone 2 minutes to answer questions. All right, sorry, thanks. Manu, you want to, I don't know who wants to start. We'll start with Manu.
Great, happy to start. Since I've got exactly 60 seconds, I'll jump right in. My name's Manu. I was born and raised here in Santa Cruz County. My parents live out in Corralitos, and my grandparents are close to Pleasure Point. So I'm well familiar with both the rural and urban issues in our community. I graduated from Stanford and have worked for a number of tech startups, including one that I started myself, Civinomics, where we created a political social network and also did polling for many of the agencies, including the city and county here in Santa Cruz County. Some of the issues I'm most proud of from my first few years and change in office are, one, that we've completely revamped the metro system. It'll soon be free, coming every 15 minutes on 3 corridors across town, and we've got the largest fleet of hydrogen buses on order, arriving soon. We completely revamped the general plan so that parcels like 41st and Soquel Drive, which were once being planned for a Nissan dealership, are now being planned for 100% affordable housing. And I'm out of time, but I look forward to your questions.
Okay, Lani.
Thanks so much. My name is Lani Faulkner. It's an honor to be here. I'm a scientist. Oh, you have to start over again.
Start over the time.
Good. I'm honored to be here. My name is Lani Faulkner. I'm a scientist, mom, and founder of the organization Equity Transit. I have 3 degrees, including a master's in human physiology, and I've worked nationally and internationally in the medical field, collaborating across agencies and functions, bringing people together to work on multi-million-dollar projects comparable to the work of a county supervisor. I spent the last several years as a stakeholder with a number of local agencies like the Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience and the Community Traffic Safety Coalition. I've been asked to run by senior leadership in our community who were shocked when the first thing the incumbent did in 2021 was to fire 2 senior women from their volunteer commission to replace them with 2 male friends rather than respectfully allowing them to finish their term. I've been asked to run by Live Oak and Soquel school board members, union members, and others that have shared their voices have not been heard and their needs have not been met by the incumbent. I've been endorsed by 22 organizations, including 10 major unions, and local and state leaders, including Senator Bill Manning, Sam Farr, and Mark Stone. Thank you so much.
There's a lot there. We'll get to some of those thoughts coming up. Okay, I think there's a lot there to answer to. I'm sure Manu would like to speak to some of those.
Happy to just respond directly to.
Okay, why don't we just start with that?
Sure. Well, first of all, I mean, this accusation that I haven't been responsive is pretty blatantly false. I think I've actually set the gold standard in terms of public engagement and outreach on our Board of Supervisors today. And then again, that is grounded in my work in civonomics. So I hold a regular town hall meeting. I rotate it throughout the district so that each neighborhood has a chance to be heard, specifically about their issues. I publish a newsletter before each one of our Board of Supervisors meetings so that people have a sense of what's going to be voted on and can engage if necessary. You can check online. I have published way more newsletters than any other supervisor out there. I hold regular office hours every Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month, and also attend the farmers market so that people have a chance to engage with me even when, and don't have to find me, I'm going out to them. So if people haven't been heard, I don't know if they're actually trying to get in touch with me. I mean, granted, this position, the first district, is different from every others in that we have the most unincorporated residents of any of the districts, which means that we have the most people where the supervisor is the only local government official they can seek out. So yes, I'm sure that occasionally we miss some communication, but we try to correct that as quickly as possible and create every opportunity to hear from people.
Do you have anything to respond to that? In a sense, why are you? He's saying he is effective. You're saying he's ineffective.
Well, actually, I'm not saying he's ineffective in that regard to the seniors and the representatives of our school board members. I would say that it's the people that have come to me that have asked me to run. I wouldn't be running if I felt that our current supervisor was effective and meeting the needs of our community members. We have folks in our rural community who've really stepped up and asked me to run, our school board members, some fire board members. There's a lot of people throughout the district who really have felt left behind. And it's those folks that I'm stepping up to run for.
Okay, well, let's turn it back to you, Manu. Let's hear a little bit, why are you running again? Why do you want this job?
Yeah, well, when you're supervisor, you're responsible for a lot. I mean, as I mentioned, the most unincorporated constituents of any of the district. And it does definitely take at least a year to figure out exactly how to do the job. And then, moreover, time moves extremely slowly in government, especially because, it's not... If we had full authority just to do things at the county, it'd be great. But there's always overlapping jurisdictions, whether it's a state agency. I was just out at Morin Lake. We were looking at those trees that came down, horrible. And luckily no one was hurt, but of course some property was damaged. We would have taken out more trees, but we are hampered by our agreements with State Fish and Wildlife, with the Coastal Commission. And so that permeates into every single issue that I deal with. And I feel like I've really got a good handle on how to get things done and have worked collaboratively with every other member of the Board of Supervisors today and look forward to continue to bring out the best of the entire board. And so I want to run because I think that I really can make a difference with another term in addressing the two biggest issues which I see in our community, which is one, making sure that we can actually build housing. And I've tried a number of things on our planning department, but I think I'm zeroing on finally the reforms that are going to be needed to help people build, as well as to build workforce housing. And then really have tried to get to the bottom of the financial issues that our county faces. You mentioned a $1.5 billion budget. That's not entirely true. I think it's closer to 1.2.
But 1.1.
Okay.
1.1, I said. I
misheard
think I
you.
said 1.1.
I'm sorry. But the board really only has full discretion over 200 million of that. And a lot of that is state money that flows through the county. I think that we really need to fundamentally address the way our property taxes are allocated in this community so that we have more discretion at the local level and can address more of the nuisance issues that you mentioned, including roads.
Okay, Lani, your turn. Why are you running?
Well, I think I alluded to that in my earlier statement, but I feel like the community has stepped up and mentioned that there are a number of different issues that we're facing that have not been addressed. And I just want to say that the fact that somebody is a junior supervisor is different than when they are given advice from very senior advisors and choose to ignore that advice, or when they choose to not listen to the community members and directly go against the majority of the community members in the decisions that they make. So it's really important to me. I listen, I collaborate, I get in the weeds of the community, and that's why I think so many community members have stepped up to ask me to run, because I serve in a number of capacities throughout the county. My service-oriented has stemmed from, I mentioned earlier, the Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience, Community Traffic Safety Coalition. We have a serious issue in safety on our streets. We have serious issue in our urban, in our rural areas, where we have roads that are not getting fixed and not getting access, like Redwood Lodge Road, which I got a chance to see, and this huge, the water just broke it through, and there's no way for residents to get through now from one side to another. So there's a lot of things that have not been managed well, and the residents have asked me specifically to help address those issues. When you have guidance from, for example, the California Coastal Commission that has says, look, we need to get our local coastal program certified, and the incumbent has refused to take their recommendations on to do that, to me, it's not taking the recommendations of the folks who really know what needs to happen next in our community. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll let you answer some of those in a minute, though. But so, Lani, let's just go back. So you are pushing that Manu and saying that he hasn't done a good job, that you want to do better. Can you just talk more specifically in terms of, first of all, is there anything in the county that you think is going well? So what would be like 3 things that you think the county is doing well, and then really specifically how you would change it? So you are saying you're critical now, but how would you change it?
One of the things that comes to mind is I know I met with Robert Ratner, and I feel like he's doing an amazing job in terms of helping us get on our feet. We now are creating centers where everyone that comes in through homelessness goes to a navigation center, and so that's centralized. And I think that that's the direction that we need to go, so that you don't have all these little spurs that people are trying to figure out where all your homeless are being helped. So you have support services, and that's going to ramp up even better when we start to get the money from the state with the Cal Ames. Hopefully folks will vote on Proposition 1 in March that will help bring a lot more money. Let's see. I'm really appreciative, given the fight by about 74% of our community members and the vote for Measure D, that a majority of our RTC members are now moving towards looking at rail, which I think is really important to our environment. It's really important to a large percentage of our community members. I would say that that hasn't really been supported fully by the incumbent, so I don't feel like the incumbent really reflects the greater percentage of the community. And let me think, what's another thing that's going well in the community? I think that there's more awareness in the community, and I think that this is something that I would really serve to help bring awareness about the importance of how we serve our homeless community and bring more affordable housing. I served on the housing element, and that is really important. I'm hearing a lot of people say that they do want to see more development around transit-oriented corridors so that you have access and easy walkability, 15-minute walkable communities. And I really support that. And so those are 3 things that I'm really excited to see starting to happen.
Okay, and you didn't answer the 3 specific things that you want to do differently.
That I want to do differently. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. I
really
would,
quick.
Yes, I would actually really like to, just at the very top, really push much harder with the rail and trail. We've already got full funding. The state of California gave us $115 million to build the trail, and the incumbent voted against it. So I would really push to bring that trail in right away. We've already got the money for it to go all the way to Aptos. I'd also push for rail. I really would push for senior services. Again, seniors have come to me and said they've really felt left behind, so I would really serve our seniors, and I would really serve our school district. Our school district have said the incumbent, they don't even see him. He doesn't show up for events, and so that's something that I really support, Cradle to Career, and projects that support our kids. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll get back more into specifics, exactly how you would do that in a minute. I'm going to let Manu respond. But Manu, I'm just going to also ask you this, that 4 years ago you came in with lots of ideas, and a sort of similar question is, looking back, what have you learned 4 years later? What have you learned? What maybe 3 things, I asked for 3 things, what 3 things would you maybe do differently, or any decisions that you regret? And you can also respond to some of what Lani said.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm glad Ms. Faulkner approves of everything we're doing at the county to address homelessness. We are down 22% there. One of the first actions I took on the board was to commit the county to doing more to address homelessness, because it can't just be the city of Santa Cruz responding. We know that we need to act collaboratively to address this. That's why I worked with Ryan Coonerty. We introduced a motion to commit the county to building 120 units in the unincorporated area. We're close to doing 100 now between projects like Veterans Village, Park Haven Plaza, transitional behavioral health housing that we're going to be building soon. So we really are making good on that promise. Of course, it's been great to hear Ms. Faulkner come to some of our Metro board meetings and speak so approvingly about what we're doing with Metro to ramp up service. The Youth Cruise Free program we rolled out, where we've seen a 400% increase in youth riding the bus because now they can get on without any change for free. So, what I've learned, I think I've already mentioned in a couple of ways, right? Which is, one, we are so constrained by all the overlapping issues of jurisdiction and the budget. I mean, how can you get anything done if you can't make any decisions unilaterally and you have very little, if no, money to do it? I think you asked then kind of what I'll do next. I mean, I alluded to some of these things. But I've been working on trying to improve our planning department since day one as well. First going for some of the little stuff, we made ADUs under 750 square feet, essentially free to build, no permit costs. We created pre-approved ADU plans that you can pull off the website and go put in your backyard and get approval with very little overhead. And actually, most recently, I created a third-party plan check program where you can bring your own plan checker. So, and the most important thing I learned in doing that was that we actually have a certain amount of immunity as the county. We don't have to make sure every single line of code is met. We can actually approve those permits a little bit more easily, and that's what I'll push forward in a second term.
Okay, this one's coming back at you, Manu, because it's every other, right? It's your turn now. I do want to ask about this, and it seems odd to me because Measure D has already been decided, but it does seem that, and of course the Regional Transportation Commission is working on its feasibility studies right now on the rail, but Measure D does seem to be hanging around. It seems to be part of this race, and I just want to ask how you explain that. Like, what's going on? Why is Measure D? Why are we still talking about Measure D?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, I think my opponent should be thanking me for Measure D because it did help bring a certain amount of clarity to how to move forward on this issue. When I ran the first time, I said, hey, we're spending a heck of a lot of money on studies, and people should vote on this issue. And we created that opportunity for people to vote, and since the vote, I've truly honored it, right? I voted to move forward with the passenger rail environmental impact report. My opponent accused me of holding up the rail trail. I think there was one vote where I said, hey, we better look at this environmental impact report a little bit closer because we're talking about taking out a lot of trees, and I think we need to consider it carefully. But look, if I wanted to hold up the rail trail, I could have done way more. I mean, rather, I supported it by making sure that we had $1.5 million in discretionary funds for the first district committed, so that we could pull down that $100 million in state grants, and have really helped move it forward in every way. I think the real question is going forward. I mean, my opponent seems to think that the thing is fully funded. We got $100 million from the state, but we better look out for some cost overruns. I mean, I think it's going to be maybe at least $30 million more than that $100 million we got. If you don't believe me, look at the city's project over the harbor. It was bid at about, engineer's estimate, I want to say $24 million. Only bid came back at $57 million. So we're seeing hugely expensive projects come in. And when you do that much design and engineering on a trail next to the tracks, it's going to be challenges. So, we've already learned that you can't build the trail south of Rio Del Mar Boulevard with the current money we have. You're not going to connect to Watsonville. I'm curious how my opponent would deal with some of those issues.
So you can answer that, Lani, and you can also answer this question: is Measure D still part of this debate?
I want to talk about cost overruns. The Park Avenue project for Project Home Key that was approved and got millions of dollars. From what I understand now, they've cried. I read in a recent report that they don't have enough money, so that they've not done good planning. And it sounds like this project, I'm not sure how that's going to go through, but from what I understand, they're asking for more money. So I'm really curious to hear about that project. But in terms of the conversation around Measure D, first of all, we spent a lot of money fighting Measure D, and the citizens spent a lot of money running Measure D. And I think it's a big waste of money because we already voted on Proposition 116. I can show you the language is very clear. It says that we voted for passenger rail. We've actually paid a lot in taxes towards passenger rail. All of the work that we did over 10 years that landed at the purchase of the rail in 2012 were fully in support of the public owning passenger rail. And then right after we became owners, these two groups, actually it was one group called the Aptos Rail Trail Investor Group that tried to privatize it. And then that very private group then broke into Trail Now and Greenway that then tried to basically totally change the narrative around what we were trying to do with this project. We then had engineers that in 2014 we approved the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail, which was a part of it, trail beside the rail, and all of this was going through and working very well. So I would say that the efforts of Greenway, and of course Koenig was the executive director of Greenway, and so those efforts have cost us tremendous amount of time and tremendous amount of money that we really could be using. We could have those things now today.
What about? I mean, that was before. I mean, I'm super grateful for the background. But what about now? Why is this still a question now?
Well, it's still a question because you don't have a champion really standing behind it. I've talked to and I've listened to our state representative, the chair of the California Transportation Commission, and he was very clear. Santa Cruz, you made a promise. For the money that we gave you to buy the rail and to build the trail, you need to do the promise. So we don't have a champion in that regard in terms of the incumbent. He is not championing that cause, and in fact, in June, put on the Board of Supervisors to add yet another component to the trail. It adds more time and more money. In May, he voted against moving forward, something about trees, but the Greenway Trail, last I read, was a 26-foot wide trail, which actually would have destroyed a lot more trees than the proposed 12 to 16-foot, mostly 12 to 16-foot trail that we now have in progress.
So, Manu, you want to answer that? Are you not a proponent of the rail?
I actually went to Sacramento and helped and lobbied for additional funds so that we could move forward with the next segment of the passenger rail environmental impact report. Our community asked for $16 million, and we got $3.5 million. Wow. So this idea that there's just an unlimited amount of state money out there, and that if we just lobby them harder, somehow we would get all this money, I think is a little bit ridiculous, especially as we look into deficit year here at the state. And of course, that money that we did get, that $3.5 million, was from the good year. Now, of course, the money that we did get from the state in a good proportion was the $3.8 million for our metro system, right? And look, I love trains. I actually worked for the German rail system right after graduating from college, voted for high-speed rail, was excited about the fact that we were going to get local rail here. And it was just when I saw how stalled out the high-speed rail program has gotten statewide, when I realized how narrow the corridor is in this community, I honestly just had concerns whether or not we'd ever be able to get it done. Now, we're doing the study now. We'll see if it's possible. But I think we need to make sure that we look at other options to get a dedicated transit facility in this community. That's why I'm so excited about what we're doing with Metro and keep pushing forward on building a dedicated bus on shoulder lane on the highway.
Can I make I'd love to respond to
Then
that.
we're going to get through the questions, but this is good.
As far as us receiving $3.8 million for the next step, I just have to say that I feel like the state is looking at us and they're saying, look, we told you to do the thing and you're not doing the thing the way we told you, so we're going to not give you money. The bus metro has been doing the thing that they were told to do. They're doing it and they're getting the money. If we do what we're being asked to do, we will get the money. SB 125 now is allotting $4 billion to rail and trail, just like ours. Monterey is actually moving forward with building rail from Monterey to Pajaro. We need to be a part of that system that will bring us to Pajaro so we can connect to the State Rail Network. The State Rail Network has a plan. It's called the State Rail Plan. It's the #1 priority for addressing the climate crisis in our state. And the reason why that's so important is it will connect us by rail to the rest of the state. Part of the plan means they have money allotted for the plan. But we actually need to collaborate with them and not oppose them. And right now, the incumbent is seen as an opposition at the state level because he hasn't been following the plan. Thank you.
All right, let's move on a little bit from that point. The second thing that's hovering over this debate, it seems to me, is the ghost of John Leopold. So I just want to address that
He's
a little
alive.
bit. I mean, he's alive, obviously. Sorry, obviously he's alive. But I mean, it feels oddly personal. It feels like this is a revamp of the last election. So Manu, I just want to know, is there some carryover from your race with John Leopold?
Well, Jody, I think there is. Well, first of all, since we were just talking about Measure D, I think this is a good transition. I think ultimately the reason voters elected me by a very wide margin, about 57%, over a 3-term incumbent, was they realized that we needed to do things differently. And they trusted in me to bring a fresh set of eyes and ideas and creativity to the office, and that's exactly what I've done. Now, I think the other piece here is, frankly, a little bit about the entrenched political establishment in this county. And you can see that much in the way that the fundraising has gone for this race. 58% of all the donations over $100 for my campaign have come from the 1st District. Whereas my opponent here, the majority of donations over $100 for her are coming from District 3, the city of Santa Cruz. And so this is largely, I think, about the political establishment trying to re-exert control over the 1st District. I think that is a little bit about where this comes from. I've always been a little bit more independent. I didn't honestly, come up through the system as some have. So I think that's kind of the power struggle that we're seeing here.
So Lani, why don't you take a little look at this and just talk a little bit about John Leopold. Obviously, you've received a lot of endorsements that he also received. How are you different from him? How do you see his role in this race? And I hope he's watching tonight, obviously. It's not a ghost, but I meant that metaphorically.
Well, I just want to say that the incumbent ran on a promise of getting things quickly done through the planning and getting housing much more easy. And I would say we still only have 60 houses built from the CZU fire out of almost 1,000 houses. How is that actually helping the system? Because I haven't seen that. He also ran on safe streets, and as being a cyclist, I'm also a cyclist. I coached kids for 7 years, and honestly, if you look at the statistics, the safety on the streets is a lot worse. You can't just throw down green paint. We know that because what that does, it makes cyclists think they're safe, and it makes drivers not see the cyclists. And so really we need bollards and we need protective bike lanes. We also need to protect our, thank you. We also need to protect our pedestrians. We have a skyrocketing situation of pedestrians that are getting hit by cars. I work on the Community Traffic Safety Coalition. So how that relates to John Leopold, and I just feel like we are different in that my focus is different. And I'm going to look more at really a lot of the things that the community members have said are important to them and work side by side with them. I'm not a top-down leader, and I'd say a lot of people, even county and union members that have come to me and said, you haven't, with the incumbent, this top-down leader, as opposed to someone who's willing to get into the grass and get into the muck and say, I'm going to get my boots dirty and my hands dirty and work with you. And that's the kind of leader that I am. Having grown up in rural communities, I'm used to actually getting in the muck. But I'm a very different leader. But I would say that I'm similar to John in that I talked to a lot of people in campaigning, and they really miss John. I have to say a lot of, and not everybody's loved. You can't be loved by everybody. You're going to make some people upset, but a lot of people really miss John's leadership because he was really there in so many ways.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
We'll move on.
Sure.
We
I'll
have
add
lots
one
of
more
substantive
thing
issues, not just
very shortly here. I think another reason why the people elected me in 2020 was because I came with a lot of specific suggestions on things I was going to do. And now, granted, I inherited decades and decades of problems in the making, right? And I'm sorry, I wish I could have made a bigger difference on all of them in pretty much the 3 years and 1 month that I've now been in office. I think we've made some great strides. Happy to talk about those in more detail. But what I think, similar to my opponent and Supervisor Leopold, is they don't talk about any specifics. I mean, even the earlier question you asked, I didn't hear a specific proposal brought forward. I mean, on the safety issue on our streets, I have worked directly with neighborhoods. Yes, only some green paint in places, but heck, it's better than nothing. I mean, every time we revamp a street, I've worked closely with our Public Works Department to improve it as best as possible given the space allowed. And you're going to see protected bike lanes going in the whole length of Soquel Drive from Harbor to Aptos here this coming year.
We'll get to Lani, I'll let you respond too, and you can in this answer, but I think let's move on to this specific question about the budget, and let's be as specific as we can moving forward. Obviously, you both have a lot of ideas of what you want to do, but you also have this tight budget to work with. So I'll start with you, Lani. Like, what would you emphasize? What are you going to cut? Like, what are your thoughts on the budget?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really supporting is Measure K. Measure K will help us bring about $10 million a year. It will not tax things like groceries.
And it won't cut for everything. We're still going to have to cut. So some things are still going to have to face cuts. So it will cover some if it passes.
I mean, my hope is that we are actually going to bring in more funding into the community. You're making an assumption that we have to make cuts on things that we currently have, right? So that means really getting into the weeds and looking at what needs to be cut. And I would say that takes more time and sitting with our leadership and with our county staff to say, okay, these are some things that need to be cut.
Have you looked at the budget and thought about like what you might not want to have?
I've looked at the budget, but I'm really thinking more, honestly, I've spent more time thinking about how we can bring more funding in and how I can collaborate and work with our state legislators to bring more money in. Because what are you going to cut? Are you going to cut schools? You're going to cut mental health? Right. Are you going to cut affordable housing? And we already need more money to look at housing first programs. We already need more money to look at our roads, right? So we need to look at how we can bring more funding in, how we can be prioritized. And also we can look at things, when you talk about roads, let's talk about states. The state of California and the Caltrans, we should be asking them to pay for costs on Highway 1. We shouldn't be coming out of our pocket for our local streets, right? So we need to be looking at things like Measure K that will allow us to take more money and allot it towards our roads. We need to look at things like Measure K that will allow us to help with our mental health issues. How are you going to cut so many vital services? I say we need to start raising more money. We need to start working hand in hand with our legislators. And I'm a state delegate for the Democratic Party, so that's something that I really want to work hard on.
Do you want to rephrase the question a little bit? So
Well,
it's
just
how do
looking
we,
at the budget, you're looking at the
looking
budget.
at the budget, okay.
Right? And so you have a lot of ideas. You know from experience that you can't get everything through.
Yeah.
What are you going to push? What are you going to cut? What are you
Well,
not? What
right,
you know? How is it
right.
going to? How are you going to work on this?
So I think that is precisely the problem. What are you going to cut? Because when you only have $200 million in discretionary funding, and you've got to fund public safety, the sheriff's office, public defender, district attorney, we have to fund the departments just enough to be operational in order to pull down matching state funds. So the majority of the health services agency, for example, is actually money coming through the county that we then distribute in the form of social programs. But we have to fund it a little bit to make sure that there's actually staff there to help distribute that money and operate those programs. So there's just not a lot of room to cut. You're right. I don't think that asking extra nice is going to get more money out of the state, especially not in a budget deficit year where, $30 to $60 billion deficit. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, we look at what we can do in this county, and it goes back to our planning department, because the excessive process that we have issuing new permits for housing. And let me give you an example. I talked to one guy, he was just trying to get a demolition permit for his home so that then he could come in and put in a manufactured home in its place. And it took him a year just to get the demolition permit. This is insane. And it amounts to the biggest tax on our community that exists. And it's the one thing that is fully within our discretion as a county to change. So, like I said, we've been nibbling around the edges of this problem. We got whole new leadership in the planning department since I took office, made a number of significant changes, but I think we need to completely start from scratch and change the way we think about permitting in this community. And the second thing is, I don't think the state is willingly going to give us more money, but we do need to talk about property taxes, because we only get 13% of our property taxes to the county here, and we don't have enough discretionary money. So I'm working to build a statewide coalition to address this property tax issue, because it's got to change.
Lani, or is
Yeah,
it,
I'd love
Lani.
to respond to that.
Oh, you want to respond?
If you
Okay,
don't mind.
of course, sorry.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people, and I think there's a real point of misinformation here, and that is that we actually get 100% of our property taxes back to the county. So just to let you know, about 50% of those funds go towards schools, about 0.5% goes towards fire, about 4% goes to the cities, distributed between 4 cities. Then you have your water districts, your sewer districts, and all of these other specific functions that go on. 13.5% goes into specific roads and functions and parks in the unincorporated part of the county. But 100% of our property taxes actually come back to us. So the problem really is that we need more money. But it's not going to come from more property taxes unless we charge more property taxes. So I'd ask you the question, where do you want that money to come from to go to the unincorporated? Should we take it from the schools? Shall we take it from our fire departments?
I can respond to that. The county gets 13.5%. The average statewide is about 20% for counties. So it would be nice to have at least the average. It's true, 57% of our property taxes goes to schools. It all stays local, right? But what happens in those other counties where they get 20% and surely the other entities get a little bit less? Well, the answer is the state steps in to make sure the schools stay whole, or at least get the minimum amount of funding. It's called the LCFF funding formula. And because our property taxes are so conveniently covering those costs, the state basically doesn't fund those schools. And so if you look at the state funding in our county, the difference is extreme based on how old the school is, basically, what right they have to the property taxes. And so you have some schools that are getting $650 per student, and others that are getting $7,000 per student. The way the state funds schools is completely messed up, and yes, reforming that is a big piece of this as well.
I think all of us can agree that Proposition 13 was a not good thing for many reasons. It really destroyed the schools in California. One of the biggest problems with Prop 13 is that the benefit for what people do as they get older and become on a fixed income also translates to commercial, right? So we know that we need to protect our seniors and people on a fixed income, but those commercial benefits have a lot of power in Proposition 13. It would really take a state proposition and, as the incumbent said, a major coalition across the state to make these changes. But my concern is that the incumbent is unable to make some similar and important, actually more important changes here locally, really addressing the issues that we need to look at locally. Thank you, sorry.
Okay, I think I'll let you address this as we move on, but otherwise we're never going to get through the questions. We'll start with you, Manu. A lot of people in District 1 are worried about the high cost of rent. So let's talk about rent. Should the county play a role in helping with the stabilization of rent or rental assistance?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think that Prop 13 was a terrible idea. There were certainly some issues with it, but it allows a lot of people to stay in their homes. So as far as rental assistance goes, I don't think that we have the budget to directly step in and pay people's rent, but I do think that the county should create a fund that we can provide emergency rental assistance to keep people in their homes if necessary. If it's the difference between someone being out on the street and being able to make this month's rent and make things work, absolutely we should step in with some kind of assistance. And I've been talking with our Housing for Health director about doing just that. I mean, we might look at cutting some funds or allocating some of the funds from our core program. That's basically the $5 million in our budget that we allocate to nonprofits in our community. And I've asked specifically that we look at how we help with housing and homelessness initiatives. I think we could get some money for rental assistance there. And then I think there's other things we can do as far as just working with our state partners, eliminating some of the fees to apply for a new rental unit, because we've seen extortion happening there, people being charged $200 per application. That's ridiculous. We should be on a common app. So yeah, I think there are a number of things that we can do to help. And of course, fundamentally, just building more housing in the community, particularly along transit corridors. And that's a lot of what we've set the table for with the housing element and the sustainability update to our general plan.
Rent stabilization?
Absolutely. I think what we have going on right now is a serious national crisis. And I call it the gaping wound that we're bleeding out nationally, where with our wealth gap, we have, and I'm gonna state a quote, there's no state in the United States where one person earning the federal minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rate. So the bottom line way, the quickest way that we can help keep people in their housing and out of homelessness is by creating a fund, which was mentioned earlier. We can do that in part through Measure K, so that when people lose their job or have sickness or at risk of falling into homelessness, that we have a fund to help bridge the gap. And also organizations like COPA, which is an organization of organizations, will work alongside with us to help make that possible, and that's really critical. Measure K is really critical for that. Also, we need to look at vouchers, Section 8 vouchers, but the rent stabilization part is really critical, and it's something that I've done in terms of Capitola. I helped write letters to help stabilize rent in one of the mobile home parks that they had received a notice that their rent was going to go up $500 a month, which for people on fixed income is just outrageous. So for every $100 increase in rent, you see about 8% increase in homelessness. So this is a serious issue, and we're just pushing people further and further into homelessness. And so yes, I absolutely support rent stabilization.
I actually have an audience question. What are your 3 specific actions to address people who are homeless? I think, Lani, you're first.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that first line of defense, talking to Heather Rogers as a public defender, she was really adamant to say that that's that first line defense, that we need to be there with a fund to help people to keep them out of homelessness. Once a person is in homelessness, they're homeless, it costs so much more money to then bring them out of homelessness. And what ends up happening is people that fall into homelessness, they oftentimes are maybe healthy when they're housed, but then once they're homeless, they can undergo medical issues, mental health issues. They might get on substance abuse. And so it becomes a spiraling situation that ends up costing them and us as taxpayers so much more money. So let's nip that in the bud. Let's look at our, again, rent stabilization, Section 8 vouchers. Let's get more people into the available with Section 8 vouchers and into homes. That's something that I really support. Helping homeowners feel safe. How can we help homeowners feel safe? Because there's a stigma around people with Section 8 vouchers. I've actually rented to Section 8 tenants myself as a landlord in the past. I've been both a renter and a landlord. And I would say that Section 8 tenants are wonderful, and we can really, really support an important way to get people housed with that. There's models that work in other cities, and Housing First is a very important one. Now, we really don't have a strong Housing First model here in this county, with the exception of HUD-VASH. And HUD-VASH, we know here, works well. Once people get in housing, get wraparound services for that year, about 85% stay housed. So it's a very great program, and it's one that we really need to put a lot of effort and money into. Thank you.
Top three. I agree preventing homelessness is the best thing, as we already talked about, creating a fund to keep people, be able to pay rent and keep people off the streets in the first place is definitely a priority. But as far as folks who are already experiencing homelessness, my top three are more safe parking programs. Because actually the most cost-effective program that the county funds today is with the Association of Faith Communities, their safe parking program, and they have an incredibly successful exit rate from that program. I believe it's close to 50% of all people who go through the program become permanently housed, and we need to expand it. I think that, again, looking at core funds for this year would be a great source for that. The second is, yes, housing first, but we've set the bar so far up there for what housing is, right? I mean, it costs at least $500,000 to build a new apartment these days. And so we need to look at creating temporary housing solutions, transitional housing solutions. I mean, a tiny home without a bathroom is not going to be eligible for a Section 8 voucher. That's a problem. I think frankly, it's nowhere really in our zoning code or permitting code today. So I would actually create that element of defining where we can put these kinds of transitional structures. And then in other communities like Austin, with their Community First Village, we've seen that, or Seattle, which has an ordinance similar to this, we've seen that the community has actually privately funded a lot of those transitional housing units themselves. So I think we can work on that as a way to raise some funds and build some of this transitional housing. And then finally, for the folks who are truly addicted, truly suffering from mental illness, we are going to have to build more substance use disorder programs, and yes, even more locked mental health care facilities. And I think if Proposition 1 passes, that'll be one source of funds, and we can work collaboratively with neighboring counties to get that done as quickly as possible.
Okay, this is another audience question. I think, Manu, it's yours first. Describe a life experience where you developed a compromise solution that creatively addressed the concerns of two or more opposing groups. I guess a question about compromise, right? So where you creatively came up with a solution that you brought together two or more opposing groups.
You mean like every single policy issue I've worked on? Because that's the reality, right? Is as soon as you work with one group, you bring it forward, you think this is the greatest idea in the world. As soon as more people hear about it, you start hearing from the people who think it's a terrible idea and absolutely should not happen. The first thing that jumps to mind is the enhanced tenant protections ordinance that I brought forward. I worked with with COPA, Communities Organized for Relational Power and Action, who said the people we work with are suffering from, this was actually right around as the COVID eviction protections were expiring. They said we need enhanced protections, particularly for people who don't speak English, who are being threatened with eviction wrongly. And I said, great, let's improve our ordinance, and particularly with strengthened protections for folks where English is a second language. I introduced it. And then, what do you know, heard from the real estate community who said, hey, you've got something in there that's going to basically make it impossible for us to, basically cause-based evictions, like requiring that even for single-family, I think it was for multifamily units is really hard because, for example, I've got a tenant, this was coming from someone in the real estate community who's a landlord. I've got a tenant who I can't prove that he's dealing drugs, but let's just say there are white Mercedes showing up at the property at 2 a.m. and I hear lots of complaints from his neighbors. So I don't have the cause to actually evict this person, but it would, and if that's a requirement, then I'm not going to be able to help all the neighbors here in these kinds of situations. So ultimately we took out the requirement for just cause evictions in multifamily properties and got the ordinance passed so that we could still help non-English speakers.
And
Two or
yours,
more
Lani?
opposing groups.
2 or more opposing groups.
I am racking
Very
my brain
specific.
trying to think of an example. I'm really terrible at these pop kind of quizzes. But having worked in the medical world, you're always looking at solutions and working across with different groups and differing opinions. And even though I can't speak of a specific example in the moment, I think it's really critical. And to me, one thing that is core to my personality is being a bridge builder. And being a bridge builder means listening and getting a perspective, because a lot of times a person will come to an argument with a perspective that is really valid, right? And I can think of a very good example right now. I hesitate to mention it, but people on both sides of that issue have really valid emotional reasons that support why they feel the way they do. And so I think honoring the emotions behind where people come to the choices that they make or the decisions that they want to make, and then addressing those emotions and the reasons, and then trying to get people to see different perspectives, right? We see things from different perspectives wherever we stand, what our upbringing is. And getting a respectful dialogue between people is core to being able to be a successful leader in our community. And that's something that I really feel confident about. A lot of people have said my tagline is building bridges, connecting community. And I'm really serious about that. So actually now something bubbles up. Even on my own campaign team, there were people on my campaign team that said, so-and-so's on your campaign team, but there are this and that. And I'm like, wait a minute. We all have to come together and talk. And if we don't do that, even though we disagree, we're not going to build the best solutions together.
Thanks so much. The next question, I'm going to move on and ask I'm going to combine some audience questions, and I'm going to give you just 60 seconds because we're running late on time, but I want to get some more audience answers in. It's about housing, specifically this is just kind of there's several of them. What changes would you make to the current housing policies? Sort of where in District 1 would you see a space for increasing housing density?
Was that me first?
Yes.
Okay. I think what we're really missing is multifamily and multi-generational housing And where I see housing definitely is we need to look at moving it more towards those transportation corridors. And that's really critical because if we think more system-wide or systems-oriented, and I'm a systems thinker, is that if we're going to get more people out of cars or make it possible for people to have access to alternatives and use those alternatives, we're going to have more 15-minute walkable communities that they can get out of their house, walk 5 or 10 minutes, and get onto transportation and get to work, right? So that's the kind of development that I see in the future. And again, multifamily and multi-generational housing as opposed to just the single-family residential type housing, so that we can house more people and actually connecting communities, so have third spaces, having connected communities where people feel really that they can depend on each other and have more neighborhoods where they can meet together. Thanks.
So I agree. That's exactly what we're doing with the housing element and the sustainability update that we just passed. Glad you approved the plan. What else can we do? And as I mentioned, 41st and SoCal Drive, once being planned for a Nissan dealership, now being planned for 100% affordable housing. Why? Because it's on a transportation corridor, because I really fought for those 15-minute headways on that transportation corridor, which would basically make that project possible. I do think that there's more we can do. I don't think, we're going to talk about Measure M here, I don't think that more requirements are the answer. The reason we don't have more housing is because of all the freaking requirements we put on building it. Those are costs. If we add more costs, there'll be less housing. So what do we need to do? We need to look at incentives. I want to look at an incentive which would actually, within the urban area, remove the requirement for an environmental impact report, because it's infill, for any housing that is building public sector employee housing of 20 to 25%.
Thanks. Did you want to say something to that, Lani? You look like you want to.
I just wanted to say that I actually worked on the housing element, so I was a part of that effort. I also worked on the bus metro 15-minute headways. And I just want to say, by the way, that I helped connect Youth for Climate Justice, which were the ones that were proposing the free service for youth, and connected them with Michael Tree, our general manager. So I really want to give credit to them for doing that work of bringing free service to our community. And then just, another point about where to build houses. We've got workforce housing on public lands like Emmeline, Live Oak School. We've got Metro to build houses there. Fully support that and work on that. And definitely want to cut red tape and make housing process more fast. Okay.
Did you want to respond to that at all? Or do you agree with that?
Well, my opponent was a member of the public participating in all those processes. I'm glad she got involved here within the last year or so. I was actually helping to make some of those decisions. I talked to the students myself as well. So, yeah, okay. We're all stakeholders.
Right. Okay. We have a student question. I'll ask you this first, Manu. As a young person who will live to see the impacts of climate change, what climate-friendly policies do you offer and support?
Yeah. So the number one thing that we need to do, big picture, ultimately is tax carbon. Now, I think we need to tax it and give the money back, put it all back in all of our pockets so that we can spend it on climate adaptation. That's something that needs to happen at the state level. It's widely agreed upon by economists. It's the only thing that's going to work. But it's called the Carbon Fee and Dividend Program, and I introduced a resolution at the board asking our state to move forward with that. If other than that, they could reform the cap and trade system to use that money, again, put it back in everyday people's pockets so that you can, buy the heat pump, buy an electric car, et cetera. Otherwise, we need to look at adaptation strategies, and I've introduced a transfer of development rights policy that would basically mean if your home gets destroyed in a natural disaster, you'd have the ability to rebuild somewhere else, somewhere safer, rather than in the same darn place where it's going to get destroyed again.
Okay, Lani. Climate change.
Yeah, I would say I do a lot of work in climate change, and one of the top things that we need to address is transportation. So we need alternatives to transportation. We need to create housing in such a way that people have easy access to transportation. We need to support businesses so that they can actually either get people working more from home or live closer to the places that they work so that they're not schlepping over the hill or from Watsonville to here. And so herein lies rail as a very important aspect of transportation, because rail has been and always will be the most energy efficient and the most environmentally smart way of moving masses of people distances.
Great.
Then there's getting people on bikes and walking. The other very critical issue is methane. Methane is 80 times more potent of a destructor to our climate than is carbon dioxide, 80 times. And if we can pull the handle on methane, which we can do by electrifying and getting people to change their habits around driving and also around eating, I have to say that the production of methane out of cows is twice as much as what is produced by all the fossil fuel in the country, then we can actually pull the lever and make a huge change in climate change positive.
Thank you. Okay, we're reaching our end. I want to say there are quite a number of specific questions about rail trail, just to bring that up. There's lots of people asking about some things like that, about very specific, and a couple of specifics in the district. So those questions that we don't answer tonight, I will hand off to our political reporter, politics and reporter Chris Neely. He'll be moderating the next debate, and he will pick those up in his reporting. The very last question for you is, and I think I'll start with Lani, is that you've been really critical of your opponent, of Manu, tonight, and I'm wondering if there are any policies of his that you like and would support.
Well, again, I'm just a voice, a conduit through which people have spoken to me, okay? Policies that I like, I think that we agree on making things faster in the planning department, right? I've talked to a lot of developers throughout the community, and especially small town developers. What I would say is I want to put more power in our local developers' projects. Local owners, local developers, people that own a house and want to build something in their backyard. And I talked to a neighbor just down the street, and he's like, it's taken me 5 years to do the thing in the backyard. But the developer down the street, it only takes them 1.5 years. So we really need to put the power in the pockets and the people locally. And I have some various ideas, which I haven't gone into, we can talk about that later, which is really bring empowerment and money locally. I also want to see that if we can, for example, people that own second and third and fourth homes, they have vacation rentals, can we create taxation that will help improve our affordable housing issues?
Okay, so Manu, I guess you didn't quite answer everything that you like about him, but maybe you could talk about, I don't know, some things that you think that you like about what Lani has put forward, and also things that you think that you're in agreement with.
Well, I think you've heard tonight that my opponent pretty much supports my policies on housing, homelessness, and transportation. The only thing she's been critical about is that I'm not doing enough, apparently, on the rail trail. And yet, at our last Regional Transportation Commission meeting on Thursday, we were moving forward with the environmental impact report for passenger rail as quickly as government process will allow. I think the biggest difference that I can see here is specificity. I've iterated a number of things that I will do in my second term, if reelected, that I have done, and I'm still waiting to hear about what my opponent would do to address some of these issues in a very concrete way. I think that's the difference. When I took office, I had that long list of plans and came in and have done a lot of them. Not everything worked, but you got to start somewhere. You got to start with an idea.
Okay. All right, well, did you want to add anything, or we'll move on to the lightning round then? This will be our final little bit for fun. So I started with Lani. So Manu, I will start with you on the lightning round. So again, these will just be really quick one-word answers or one or two-word answers. So Manu, your favorite walk in District 1?
I think it's getting a burrito at Michoacan and walking down to Black's Beach to enjoy the surf there. Also closely tied is the Chaminade trails. Okay, Lani?
I spend a lot of time on the De La Viega trails, and I also will walk our dog from my house to the Schwan Lagoon.
Okay, Lani, favorite activity not in District 1?
So I mentioned earlier, I'm a mountain biker, and I love to mountain bike to Enchanted Forest, up to Wilder, and I also like to hike in New Marks.
I think probably going to get seafood up in Davenport at the oyster farm there.
All right, Manu, what's your secret guilty pleasure?
Whipped cream.
All right, we got one already.
The mini ice cream cones from Trader Joe's.
Oh, that's fair. I think those are one of the most popular items. Okay, Lani, do you have a song from your youth that you still rock out to when no one's looking?
No, but I love Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, psychedelic rock.
I'm more of an EDM fan. I love Bass Nectar, and that always pumps me up to start the day.
All right. Manu, superpower you wish you had.
It's always such a tough choice between flying and time travel. I'm going to go with flying, just because I'm happy with the present and would like to experience it from more vantage points.
Lani, superpower.
Creating world peace.
That's a good one. All right. And the last one, Lani, what leader, living or dead, do you wish you could ask for advice on a Santa Cruz issue?
I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown.
Okay. And what's the issue you want her help with?
How can we all just get along?
Manu?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I think I would ask Martin Luther King Jr. how he would approach the rail trail issue and help us find more common ground.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's give them both a really big hand.